Hello and welcome back to Keaton's Cooking Kitchen. In this edition, we're going to be making a Black Forest cake.
Ooh.
That's a chocolate cake topped with cherries and decorated with whipped cream all around. What's nice about this cake is that the tartness of the cherries really contrasts well with the semi-sweetness of the chocolate. You know, in selecting recipes for this series, I tried to pick ones that were memorable to me. And to that end, this recipe is especially memorable, but not for the reasons you might suspect. And that's because the only other time I've made this recipe, it was a complete disaster. Instead of a Black Forest cake, what I ended up with were rubbery, flat, unedible discs of sludge. A true disaster. What made this recipe's disaster even more surprising was that the recipe came to me from Walt Disney's kitchen. It came to me through the Cooking with Mickey cookbook, Vol.II. And I mean, when has Disney or Mickey Mouse ever steered us wrong on anything? So, our goal today is to recreate that disaster of a recipe. If everything goes according to plan, we should end up with flabby, frisbee-like chocolate discs that are good for absolutely nothing. You can't even feed them to your dog. Hopefully along the way though, we discover why this recipe is or was a disaster. Yeah. So let's get baking.
First, you are going to need 8 total eggs, some granulated sugar, some cake flour, ideally, some unsweetened cocoa powder, a bit of baking powder, a bit of baking soda, and a splash of vanilla extract. You're going to start off by greasing and lining your 8 or 8.5 inch cake pans. And you can use parchment paper that's greased, or you can use wax paper. Set your oven to 350. And then you're going to combine your eggs and your sugar. Nothing complicated about that. Now I want to show you this method of separating the eggs from the whites. I call this the spoon method. You're just going to take a spoon. You're going to put it underneath the yolk and lift it. Don't adjust your spoon, don't move it, just let the whites fall right off. There you go. And it's a very simple method. This was first introduced to me from some family friends, the Liqueur family. Hi, Mrs. Liqueur, if you're watching. And it's a super simple way of just separating the eggs yolk from the whites. If you're not a very confident baker, or if you don't feel so comfortable with the shell-to-shell method or the hand method, then this is the way to go. It's a lot less messy for sure, for me at least, and even your youngest of bakers can do this. So yeah, try it out sometime. Let me know how it goes. Next, you're going to whisk together the eggs and the sugar. At first I thought I would be whisking this to the point of them being just combined, or maybe to the point of being aerated just a bit, you know, like you would for a creme pat or something like this. But the recipe actually says to beat until thick and light. Beat until thick and light. What does that mean? That really sounds like an oxymoron to me, so I was a bit thrown off at first. And then I considered, what would happen if we just kept beating these eggs? What eventually would we come out with? And the answer to that is, if you keep beating eggs, you'll eventually come to something called the ribbon stage. And the ribbon stage is a point where if you lift the whisk up from the batter that will fall back down into the bowl will leave a trace on top that will stay there for 2 or 3 seconds, a few moments, something like that, before falling back down into the batter. And it's this distinct visual element that gives the ribbon stage its name. Other elements of the ribbon stage that are visible are that it becomes much lighter in color, and it increases in volume by a factor of 2 or 3, and that is very significant. I remember in the bakery, we would sometimes use this method for recipes that didn't have any gluten in them or any flour in them, just to give the recipe some structure. So, in retrospect, this is probably where I went wrong when I tried to first make this Black Forest cake. I probably didn't whisk my eggs to the ribbon stage. And you can see in the top left the initial viscosity and color of the eggs, and in the main screen where we end up at. And let's do a ribbon stage check here. There we go. You can see the pattern staying on top for just a while before sinking back down. Yep, this is exactly where we need to be. Alright, after all that exhausting whisking, we have some much easier tasks at hand. We're going to combine and stir and sift together all of our remaining dry ingredients. Those would be the cake flour, the unsweetened cocoa powder, the baking soda, and the baking powder. You're going to fold that into your egg mixture. I'm using a spatula, but you could also use your whisk. Whatever you need to do, so long as you can fold it in and preserve all the air that we worked so fastidiously to put into the ribbon stage eggs. Lastly, you're going to add your bit of vanilla extract. Fold that in as well. And you're going to add the batter to the pans, place them in your 350-degree oven for approximately 20 minutes until the tops of the cakes spring back when you touch them. Next, we're going to make some simple syrup with some cherry liqueur, some water, and some sugar. And as the name implies, a simple syrup is indeed simple to make. You're just going to combine your sugar and your water in a saucepan. You're going to stir that together and bring that to a boil. You can boil it for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's not especially important in this recipe, as you're just going to be brushing it on top of the cakes. Now, once that has been brought to the boil, you can remove it from the heat and add in your cherry liqueur. If you're somebody who really likes at-home frappuccinos or drinks or stuff like that, then knowing how to make simple syrups is a must-know trick, because you can sub out the liqueur for vanilla extract or really whatever you want. And hey, after 20 minutes, look what we got here. To me, this does not look like little rubbery, flabby sludge pancakes. This looks like good spongy cake, like actually edible. So I think we might be on the right track here, yeah. For the cake assembly, you're going to need some cherry pie filling, some cherry liqueur, which is optional, some semi-sweet chocolate, and heavy whipping cream. Go ahead and grate or shave the chocolate, whichever you prefer. If you would prefer to use dark chocolate instead of this semi-sweet chocolate, go right ahead. Next, combine the cherry pie filling and the optional cherry liqueur. I should have used a bigger bowl for this, but so be it. Next, make the whipped cream. Just take your heavy whipping cream and whip that to stiff peaks. If you want to make sure it's extra stiff and a bit sweet, go ahead and add some powdered sugar to that as well. For the assembly, you're going to remove the wax paper and parchment paper from your cake layers, and you're going to start brushing on some simple syrup for the first layer. Next, add your cherry pie filling. about half of the filling, and try your best to distribute those evenly, but no need to be too finicky about it. Top that with your second cake layer, give it a gentle pat. And you're going to brush that layer with the simple syrup as well. There's no imperative to use all of the simple syrup, but why not? Following that, you're going to cover the entire cake with your whipped cream. Some people prefer their Black Forest cakes with the sides exposed to show off the cherries that are on the inside, but since this recipe made so much whipped cream, I thought I would just go ahead and decorate everything, covering the sides, yada yada yada. I am piping. You do not need to pipe. You can do what you want. You do you. I feel that decorating your bakes is kind of a personal preference sort of thing, so you do what you want. You're going to top the cake with the remainder of your cherry pie filling. You might need a bit more than the 1.5 or 1 1/4 cups that the recipe recommends, so that's why I used what was left in the can. For the dirty part of this recipe, you're just going to chuck all of those chocolate shavings onto the cake and get them on through whatever means possible. And then you'll refrigerate for at least 1 hour before serving. Now, if you're looking for a really rich and decadent chocolate cake, this is not that. Instead, what you have is an extremely light sponge cake where you can taste all the components. They each have their individual spot. And because it is so light and airy, you really shouldn't feel bad about taking 1 serving, 2 servings. Just eat on up. You won't regret it.
Well, there it is, a Black Forest cake straight out of the quizzical mind of Mickey Mouse. Strangely enough, in our original goal of replicating that disaster recipe, we actually failed, and pleasantly so. And in doing so, we redeemed our younger self. Huzzah! Having said that, I don't think we should let dear old Mickey off the hook, though. I don't think that most at-home bakers or beginner bakers would have gone so far as to whip their eggs to the ribbon stage. My younger self sure didn't. Perhaps they've corrected this element of the recipe in later editions. I'm not quite sure. If I were to attempt this recipe again, I would probably put in more cherries to bring home that flavor a bit more, and use more whipped cream in the center and just all around for more visual appeal and a variety of texture as well. So thank you for joining us on this edition of Keaton's Cooking Kitchen. Hope to see you again soon. Farewell.